today. I have been greatly helped by all the speakers and their organizations who are joining us here today, and I chose to organize it for two main reasons. One, next week in San Francisco, the Global Climate Action Summit of World Leaders is taking place from Wednesday through Friday, and we, the world's people, want to send them a message that we care about our climate and we're standing up together to rise for our climate. In fact, let's send a message right now. What do we do for climate safety? Rise! What do we do for climate action?
Rise!
One more time. What do we do for climate safety?
Rise!
What do we do for climate action?
Rise!
Thank you. The second reason we're here today is because in addition to rising up and encouraging each other and our existing elected leaders, we must also be better climate voters. And to help you continue to rise and vote as a climate voter, I have invited some great speakers who will share some very important indigenous and traditional wisdom with us, some very important climate science with us, and some very important information on the candidates who are serious about climate action and legislation. As you've probably heard, there's an election coming up on Tuesday, November 6th, and you can vote at the polls or vote early. Information is readily available online. I've added a poster with some of the links in several places here. And we also have information at your local library, of course, and political parties' offices. The reason your votes are so important in our representative democracy is that while individual actions certainly matter toward any goal, the legislation and policies of our local, state, and federal governments are the best at leading our larger society in the directions we need to go, especially when key businesses in the free market may act far too slowly or even obstruct our goals as business leaders and lobbyists, as is sometimes the case. And it certainly is the case in relation to the necessary goals of reducing and stopping greenhouse gas emissions, which the United States has been emitting for decades as a top emitter and even still emits along with its multinational corporations operating all over the world. While new developing countries such as China and India have now become top emitters too, they are at least realizing that they must leapfrog to renewables and are working hard to do so throughout their countries. So before I introduce our next speaker, let's send one more message out into the world on this global day of climate action. What do we do for climate votes? Rise! And what do we do for climate legislation?
Rise!
One more time. What do we do for climate votes?
Rise!
And what do we do for climate legislation?
Rise!
Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce some of our next speakers here today who have joined us. And to begin, we will start with some indigenous wisdom that is centuries old. And of course, women bring that knowledge as well too. But today we have Ho-Chunk Nation member Bill Greendeer, and he will talk about holding leaders in society more responsible for the well-being of existing and next generations, the 7 generations principle, and also the ethical idea of the rights of nature. Bill Greendeer, would you please join us from the Ho-Chunk Nation? Thank you.
Ajla, Kumaniga, Ingaidi. I'm a deer clan member of the Ho-Chunk Nation. Deer that runs into the direction of the south wind is what I'm called. My name. Government tracking name, Bill Greendeer. Anyway, I really wanted to say something really hey, when we're talking about politics, we have to watch and hang together as people in order to keep our leaders in line. We have to have a lot of things going on with our people hanging together. We are all together. We're all related. This is something that we've always kind of believed in. Not only that, we're related to this tree. We have to take care of these trees, the water out here. There's a lot of things out there that we have to be taking care of and watching over. I've really walked the Enbridge pipeline 33 days with help of Julie Delaterre and tribal members, non-tribal members. Everybody else helped me walk that 420 plus miles. And I actually learned a lot about what Enbridge is all about. And they're not a good company. 800 spills in 10 years, that don't sound good at all. We have to take care of this water. We have to take care of our trees. We got governments that are trying to actually exploit and get into tribal lands. And that's where this whole thing about the rights of nature is. We have to take care of these little birds. We have to take care of this dog in front of us. We have to take care of these trees. We have to respect them. They are related to us. They keep us going. The water keeps us going. We're not going to have anything left if we keep letting these politicians put things together. We have to put the correct politicians in our political system to take care of this stuff. I actually, talking about the rights of nature, I introduced the rights of nature, which says that we are brothers and sisters to these trees, these plants, the water, the animals, the insects. We're all related to all this stuff. And, you know, I wake up every morning and happy just to see the sun. And like I was saying, we have to have the right people in government. We have to learn and really get out there and vote and think about all the things that are happening with us. The same with the tribal members. We have to take care of the people like we have always been taking care of people in the long haul, so to speak. We have been here for a long time. You know, I was laughing because of the flooding. I mean, that poor little town of Ontario, Wisconsin, getting flooded so bad. Well, you got to kind of love them for trying, even though they kind of put a little village right on the floodplain. You gotta love those guys. You know, they're really trying. You know, but they've only been here a couple hundred years. You know, but the rights of nature is something that I think everybody should try to do. We should be able to there's 150 different communities that are actually using the rights of nature that are non-native. We could put this into a county ordinance, a township ordinance, anywhere here. We could protect, I love this, Ishanic Lake. That's our Ho-Chunk word for lake, so it's Lake. You gotta watch that place. Take care of it. It's a good way to keep going, and I'm trying to get it into our Constitution. Our Constitution, if you think about it, there is not one amendment in the Constitution that protects nature. Not one. Even with our Ho-Chunk people. I'm actually trying to introduce next week legislation to amend our Constitution to put the rights of nature into our Constitution. To me, that's really helpful. Thank you. But I really believe in the rights of nature. Ecuador's had it for 9+ years now, and they're winning in court, taking care of the land. We could be doing that here. Me as a native, you as a non-natives, all of us. we could all be trying to take care of Mississippi, the Black River, all these little lakes, all these little rivers that are around us. We could be taking care of them. That's what the Rights of Nature is all about. And I really appreciate being able to be invited to speak here today. It's a real good feeling to know that people are actually listening somewhere out there to take care of these trees, to take care of the air, take care of the water. This is all what life is all about, is taking care of our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Thank you again, Bill. Such wise words that we really need to consider. It isn't all about us. They call this the age of the Anthropocene, and that means human beings. But what about all of, indeed, our brothers and sisters and the creatures that we share the earth with? We depend on them, and they certainly depend on us. So I'd also like to invite one of our next speakers. Do we have Xian in the crowd today from our Hmong community? Yer was going to try to be here, and she and another person were talking over who it might be. But if she comes a little later, we'll welcome her. Well, now let's talk a little bit about the climate science. We know the wisdom. We've had the wisdom for centuries. And Bill is sharing that with us as new immigrants from the last couple centuries. And now let's talk about the science. We have UWL Professor Paul Reyerson here. He is from the Earth Science and Geography Department. So Paul, would you please join us? And he will speak on the latest global and national climate science and impacts. Thank you, Paul.
Well, thanks everybody for coming on out. It's such a beautiful day. It's nice to see so many people interested in combating climate change.
Put the mic closer to your mouth.
Like this?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So let's keep this a little informal. What is climate change? What is climate change? Thank you. Anybody?
Greenhouse gases traps the atmosphere that then trap in the heat and heat up the planet.
Yes, thank you. Climate change is long-term weather. And it's been going on long before humans have been here. And it will continue to go on long after we're gone. Now, humans are modifying that primarily through the burning of fossil fuels. We're putting a lot of greenhouse gases in the air, carbon dioxide, methane, things like that. By doing that, we are modifying or intensifying the greenhouse effect. So it's a very simple scientific principle. The more GHGs or carbon dioxide you have in the air, the warmer it's going to get, or the more heat energy we trap. Now, what are we actually seeing? What indicators do we have that the Earth's climate is actually changing? So let me ask you, what have we seen? What are we seeing in the news lately? Storms, extreme weather, flooding.
No glaciers.
No glaciers. Glaciers are melting. Yep. Droughts, higher temperatures, fires, wildfires out west. Yeah. So there seems to be a lot of stuff going on. Although we have to be a little careful, it's difficult to attribute any one weather event to climate change. But we can say for sure that climate change is increasing the likelihood of these events. Yeah, so we also talked about glaciers. Glaciers and ice sheets worldwide are melting. That's contributing to sea level rise. Since the 19th century, we've seen about 6 inches of sea level rise just from glacial ice melting. As the oceans warm up, we're also seeing that water expand through thermal expansion, and that's contributed another 6 inches of sea level rise. So a total of 1 foot doesn't really sound like that much, but if you live in a low-lying coastal area like Miami or New Orleans or Manhattan or Bangladesh or something like that, that can really increase the likelihood of storm flooding, and it puts people and property at risk for damage. Some other things we've seen over the years. Since the 19th century, we've seen about 2 degrees Fahrenheit warming of average global temperatures. But again, it doesn't sound like very much, but just think about how much energy is required to heat up the entire atmosphere 2 degrees. It's quite a bit. Other things, an increase in flooding in some areas with sea level rise. The Arctic is warming faster than just about anywhere else on the Earth. This is leading to a decrease in permanent sea ice. Arctic sea ice has decreased by about 40% since the 1970s, which of course is quite drastic. And I think we've all seen the pictures of starving polar bears on the news, unfortunately, because polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt. Also related to the Arctic is permafrost, or permanently frozen soils. It's still pretty cold up there, and we have a lot of ice in these soils. Well, it just so happens that permafrost soils hold an enormous amount of carbon in them. So plants grow in the short summertime, they die, but they don't decay because it's so cold. So organic carbon just keeps building up year after year after year. In fact, permafrost soils hold something like 1,700 billion tons of organic carbon in them. The problem is, though, is that those permafrost soils are starting to melt. And as they melt, that organic matter, that organic carbon is starting to decompose. And where does it go? It turns into carbon dioxide and methane and so on, goes into the air, and it intensifies the greenhouse effect. So it makes things even warmer. And I could go on with a few more examples, but what about the next 100 years or so? What can we expect in the future? Well, it's tough to say what's going to happen with global average temperatures, because it really depends on what people are going to do. Are we going to decide that we want to really curb climate change? Are we going to pass strict emissions laws, things like that? Or are we just going to keep doing what we're doing, as if nothing's wrong at all? But if we stay on the current trajectory of what we're on right now, we could probably expect somewhere between 3 and 5 degrees Fahrenheit of extra warming, which is somewhat alarming. That's reaching dangerous territory when it comes to climate change. We could also expect more extreme weather events like hurricanes, typhoons. We all remember Hurricane Harvey, Irma, Maria. One just hit Hawaii not too long ago. Japan's been inundated by typhoons again and again. So we can expect those to be more common, and we can expect those to get stronger. Permafrost will continue to melt, which will of course amplify global warming and so forth. So looking at the future, it looks kind of bleak, and it almost makes a person want to give up hope. But as some of the other speakers are going to tell you, there is reason to keep working forward. There is reason to keep hoping that humanity is going to figure this out. There's lots of things going on at international, national, state, municipal levels to help curb this. I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you. I don't know if we're taking questions or not.
Well, Paul did a wonderful job of really encapsulating what's happening in a very short amount of time, and I found that really such a great overview. So thank you, Paul.
Hopefully it was loud enough.
Yes, we could hear. Thank you. And to follow up, we now have the Sustainability Institute's Casey Meehan, and he will speak on Midwestern state impacts and some of the many opportunities and benefits of sustainability. So Casey, please join us.
So first, I do want to acknowledge that we are meeting here on the traditional land of the Ho-Chunk, the Sauk, the Sioux, and the Squaxin people. So I think I can speak on behalf of all of us that we're grateful for your stewardship of the land over the generation. So thank you. I also want to say that while I represent the Sustainability Institute and I'm also the Sustainability Coordinator at Western Technical College, not all the opinions that I share might be reflective of those organizations, so I'm speaking as a private citizen here. So what can we expect here in the driftless area over the next 30 years, let's say, because of human-induced global warming? The simplest way to put it is that we can expect things to get hotter and wetter. These are the two big things. So globally, 18 of the last 20 years have been the hottest on record. 2018 is shaping up to be right in there as well. And by all accounts, this will continue around this area as well. So for instance, we can look at the average number of dangerous heat index days in the La Crosse area. So the heat index is just the feels like temperature, right? So it's the combination of temperature and humidity, and that combines to form the feels like temperature. So dangerous heat index is anything that's 105 degrees or higher. That's when bodies start shutting down because it's just too hot. We can't cool ourselves off. Well, in 2000, the average number of dangerous heat index days in La Crosse was 2. By 2030, we can expect, and this is with business as usual trajectories, by 2030 we can expect 12 dangerous heat index days per year here in La Crosse. And by 2050 we can expect 25 dangerous heat index days right here in La Crosse. And winters are actually where we're seeing most of the warming in this area. So since 1970, winter has warmed up on average 5.2 degrees warmer now than it was in 1970. By 2050, we can expect the climate here in La Crosse to be similar to Springfield, Illinois today. So it's quite a big difference. And so that's the hotter side. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe the whale in the bathtub, the extreme weather events, right? And these downpours that we're having. So parts of western and southern Wisconsin have received more rain in the last 2 weeks than they normally get over 6 months. And this trend is sharply on the rise, and it will continue. Since 1958, there's been a 42% increase in the amount of precipitation falling in these major rainfall events. So Minnesota does something kind of cool. They measure what's called mega rain events. And they've been doing this since 1866. A mega rain event is an event that drops 6 inches or more of rain over an area of 1,000 square miles or more. So massive downpours. Minnesota, since 1972, has had 11 mega rain events. 8 of those have happened since 2000. There were 2 alone in 2016. And possibly 1 in 2008, earlier this summer. And I'm not sure about these last 2 weeks. I haven't seen any totals if that was also a mega rain event in Minnesota. And why do we care about this? Well, heat and precipitation, major precipitation, it matters, right? It's causing massive disruptions to our ecosystems. It's wiping out entire sectors of the economy. It's draining our tax coffers as we have to rebuild again and again and again. And it's taking an enormous toll on human health and just our spirit. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be like this. So the projections, like I said, the projections I shared are business as usual, right? If we were just to maintain this trajectory. It means there's still a little window open, just a tiny one, but there's a window there open for us to limit the severity of these impacts and the rate that they occur. And we need the way we do that is by sharply decreasing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions we're putting out there. And what makes me maybe particularly hopeful about this is that there are many of us out there, in fact, many of you here, that are asking sort of a Kennedy-esque type question, right? It's not only what we can do for climate change, but you're also asking what climate change can do for us. So what I mean by that is there's people out there who are recognizing that there's just some unavoidable consequences. At this point, there's some unavoidable consequences, right? But what they're doing is they're leveraging that, and they're thinking about ways of reinventing our communities so that they can operate in ways that are more just and balanced with the way that things are supposed to be in nature. And like I said, individually, lots of us are taking those actions, right, that help us envision this path forward. So I see it every day with our local and really strong organic farm movement in this area. I see it with our changing views on transit and how we get around. I see it with the uptick in interest in solar and wind power. I see it with the sustainability plans that different organizations and businesses are rolling out. I see it with the rallies that people are having, and I'm seeing it with people engaging in climate issues in greater numbers than we ever have seen in the past. So there's some hope there, right? And your actions are super important and inspiring for a number of reasons. But the truth is that even collectively, our individual actions aren't nearly enough for what we need to do to change this. We need fundamental change in how our society operates and thinks, from the top levels of our federal government down to the smallest municipalities. And one important first step here is enacting aggressive reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. We need to hold elected officials on both sides of the aisle accountable for foot dragging and not let them fall back on that often used excuse that actions are just impossible because we just don't have the money to do this, right? I don't know about you, but I don't buy that excuse. When we can find upwards of $5 trillion to fund a 17-year war, when we can overhaul a tax law in order to give billions back to the richest 1%, when we can invest $4 billion in taxpayer money to lure an overseas private company with a shaky environmental record and a shakier promise on jobs, it isn't money that's a scarcity, it's political will, right? So now, if we're honest with ourselves, so we can't put the blame entirely at the feet of our elected representatives. Let's also recognize that up until now, we really haven't made it all that easy for our elected officials to take up this cause. Because let's be honest, it's really tough to rally around a message of despair. I have a climate colleague in Pittsburgh who equates all this, who says, you know, we're a lot like the kid who invites all his classmates to his birthday party, right? And only one kid comes. And then we spend the entire time griping and groaning to our one guest about why nobody else showed up. So for way too long here, we have framed and we have allowed others to frame that sustainability is this thing that's rooted in scarcity and sacrifice and gloom and doom. And so I'm inviting you today to think about advancing another frame. So what would change if we talked about sustainability not in terms of scarcity and sacrifice, but instead in terms of abundance? Because when we live sustainably, we have an abundance of clean air and water. When we live sustainably, we have an abundance of local, fresh, healthy food. When we live sustainably, we have an abundance of physical and mental well-being. When we live sustainably, we have an abundance of transportation options that meet everybody's needs. When we live sustainably, we have an abundance of decent jobs that pay a livable wage. When we live sustainably, we have an abundance of tax dollars available to spend on things other than rebuilding after the last climate disaster. When we live sustainably, we have an abundance of social capital and community spirit. So when we truly live sustainably, we have abundance. And what also if we were to hitch sustainability to the idea of freedom? So after all, we can't truly be free if the air quality and heat trap us indoors all day. We can't truly be free if the ecosystems on which we rely are destroyed. We can't really be free if we don't have access to clean water, or if we have an increase in proportion of our income going to pay energy bills. We can't truly be free if we need to rebuild our houses every year. We're not truly free if our representatives refuse to actively and immediately challenge the status quo that we're in right now. So let's reclaim and reframe the story of sustainability. Sustainability is about abundance. Sustainability is about freedom. freedom to live healthy, full lives in balance with the planet. And sustainability is about creating a society optimized for everyone, not maximized for a few. So by all means, keep up the good work that we're doing. We're creating abundance, we're nurturing freedom. This is great. But let's also double down on our efforts to engage our elected officials with respect, with fortitude, so that each one of them understands that a vote against aggressive climate change action is a vote against our freedom, it's a vote against our well-being. And from now on, let's make this story of sustainability so compelling and so filled with hope that our elected officials, our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, can't help but join this movement. So thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to my words. And thank you for getting out and voting this November.